Hi everyone, welcome to this co-director open house webinar. Um, we are maybe going to wait for one or two more people, but feel free to, well, obviously it's a webinar, so feel free to just do what you got to do in the background. We're just gonna, while we wait for people, we'll just release a little poll asking where you're joining from. So feel free to let us know as we wait. So the options are Bristol, wider southwest, southeast, and the rest of the UK. And there's another option for other, but you can tell us in the Q&A if there's somewhere else that you're joining from. That was just what we could do in a quick amount of time. No judgment and no expectations of where you might be joining from today. Awesome. 67% are from Bristol, or joining from Bristol at least today. Amazing.
Oh, so welcome everyone. So we're going to start off the webinar just kind of going through the kind of basics of the job description, what we're looking for in the next co-directors of Rising. Then we'll have a bit of time for any questions that you guys have got, and then we'll also go through the process of how we're going to be choosing co-directors because we know it's something that we put a lot of thought into, but we also know it's quite complicated or it can be from the outside. So we just wanted to give you an extra opportunity to kind of go through the process. But I'm going to share my screen now, I think. So what comes next? Uh, uh, uh. Oh, oh yeah, and we will publish any answers from the questions that you guys ask on the FAQ part of our website. And we've also published any questions that were asked in the previous webinar or have been asked throughout this process as part of the FAQ. So it's been regularly updated.
Okay, so I can start. Sorry. All right. So in terms of the headline info, as we said, this is the explainer webinar open house session for the recruitment of two new co-directors for Rising Arts Agency. So the role is co-director. The salary is £36,000 full-time equivalent, which works out roughly to £28,800 before taxes for 4 days a week or 32 hours a week. The contract or contact, but his contract is 5 years. So that's just a little bit about what we're looking for as two people, and
Yeah.
they don't share the
People
money.
both working 32 hours a week
Yes.
each. Yeah. So we're Rising. We're a youth-led agency that works with underrepresented creative young people aged 18 to 30-ish in and near Bristol to fulfill their creative ambitions and affect wider social change. So we're genuinely led by young people, and so we've committed to transitioning our leadership at least every 5 years. And in 2026, it will be our second leadership transition after the transition to me and Euella.
So, in terms of how this has kind of come about, so Jess and myself, who are the current co-directors, we were invited to become Rising's leaders by Kamina, who is the founder of Rising and also currently one of the non-exec directors. And we can talk a little bit about that in a minute, what that means. But that happened while we were already in the team. So this time we're really excited because we've designed an open recruitment process that means that this opportunity to lead Rising is open to people who are already in the team or the community or other people who might not currently be engaging with our work. So we hope that this feels open and accessible.
So just a bit about our history and kind of some of the key things that we've done over the almost 10 years we've been in existence. So yeah, we were founded in 2016 by Camilla Walton, who is in the orange glasses in this photo, as a not-for-profit social enterprise. And in her term as director from 2016 to 2021, we became known for three major kind of flagship projects. So the first one, Whose Culture, ran from 2018 to 2021, and it explored the data gap around young people of colour's access to culture in Bristol and really kind of overhauled Rising's community to be global majority young people and really fostered a sense of community and kind of peer learning amongst young people of colour. And then from 2019 to 2025, we have Be It, which was a transforming leadership program funded by Arts Council, and that supported 20 young leaders over 2 years during the pandemic to kind of reimagine leadership and question the kind of hierarchical, very masculine models of leadership that we were seeing perpetuated globally, but also particularly in the cultural sector. And then from 2020 to 2022 was Whose Future. So this photo is actually from our second Whose Future launch in 2021. But the original one in 2020 was kind of in response to advertisers stopping advertising. And so we took up billboards and posters, sites all over Bristol with the voices, artwork, and demands of young people from our community.
So in terms of Jess and my term, so from 2021 to 2025, we focused less on maybe the big flagship projects and more on the kind of deeper work of the agency and solidifying the agency's processes. So from 2018 to present, so there's been an overlap with Kamina's term, but on board. So that was co-created with Kamina, and we've continued to evolve it, but it supports. We recruit, support, and train young people onto the boards of organisations across the Southwest and beyond. In 2022 to 2023, we worked on our Power in Partnerships research project, which was in partnership with King's College London, exploring power dynamics when working in partnerships in the cultural sector. And that was inspired by themes that were coming up in our work around power dynamics and really wanted to explore that and share that with the wider sector. And then in 2023 to present is Caring Work Cultures. So we launched our first ever training program, which is focused on care in governance and also in organizations. Like, how do you foster a caring work culture? And that was it was also really inspired by the work that's gone on in Rising throughout about how we have a caring culture and how we support others to do the same.
So yeah, as Euella mentioned, we just wanted to kind of give a bit of an overview of Rising structure. So obviously we've talked about the co-director's role in that. And currently, as two co-directors, we are supported by four non-executive directors. And they kind of oversee the head of the agency. So things like finances, legal responsibilities. If we were a charity, it would be more like a kind of trustee relationship. And then we also have an advisory board who oversee more of the heart of the agency. So like the vision, values, etc. behind our work. And we see that as a really kind of open and experimental space. So our advisory board is really, so are our non-execs very questioning of the work, but ensuring that we have both that kind of legal compliance and support, but also this kind of more expansive exploratory space too, in terms of support for the co-directors. And currently within the Rising team, we have one other team member, a community producer who kind of oversees the engagement of the community and regular programming of support for them. We did have an agency producer until October last year, and they kind of oversaw a lot of the partnership work and kind of agency development side of our work. We didn't want to re-recruit them because we want the new co-directors to decide whether that's the kind of structure that they want to continue for the agency. But we've also had lots of different roles over the years, including storytellers, which is kind of more of a comms role, specifically around development, fundraising, partnerships, etc., and producers for specific projects. And then all of this is kind of underpinned by our community of 90 plus creatives who are multidisciplinary, from a various lived experiences, and they really feed into all of the work, the strategy and direction of the agency.
So, in terms of who we're looking for, so we're looking for people who have a vision and ability to get things done, but aren't afraid to change direction in response to changing needs. So, for us, this is less about where you come from and more about what you can bring to the table. And as we said before, we're looking for two people to co-lead the next 5 years of Rising.
So you could be an experienced leader, producer, creative, or be looking for work after a period of focus on caring responsibilities or something completely different. We know a lot of people say these kinds of things, but we genuinely mean it. Like we want this opportunity to be accessible to people who might not be able to lead in other spaces and in other ways. What matters to us is that you're excited by the endless potential for real world change through mobilizing young creatives, getting them paid, and using creativity to challenge the status quo and start building radical new futures for everyone.
Um, just to remind you that there is a Q&A function in the webinar, so feel free to ask questions as you go. But in terms of the role, so the role is really shaped by the people doing it. And that's why, as Jess said, we really genuinely want to encourage as many people as possible to apply because we feel like this is an opportunity for more people to be able to enter positions of decision making and etc. But it's important to know that the co-leadership isn't the same as a job share, and it's different. So we're not looking for two people to split one role or the duties or responsibilities of one role. We're looking for two people to share the full responsibility for all aspects needed to lead the agency. So hopefully that clears that up for some people.
And just to explain like different ways that could potentially work, we wanted to draw on some real life examples. So for me and Euella, we currently have a very integrated co-leadership model where the majority of the decisions are made collaboratively. All responsibilities are shared, so nothing is kind of one person's responsibility or remit. And we both just go by co-director. We don't have any specialisms. And then there's Norwest Media Centre, another organisation in Bristol that has more of a dual leadership model. And this is also used a lot in theatres where they have the kind of executive and creative director split, where most decisions are made collectively, but people have different specialisms, and it's often split between the kind of business and creative sides of an organisation, but doesn't necessarily have to be. And at Norwest Media Centre, they also have specific kind of co-directors of creative or co-director of business. But most responsibilities are still shared, including things like fundraising and financial responsibility. And then Eventbrite has what's called a complementary co-leadership model, where some decisions are made collectively and specialisms mean that decisions are also made independently. Only a few or no responsibilities are shared, and they each have unique titles related to specialism. So we kind of, whilst me and Euella have led with an integrated model, that's what's worked for us, our interests and our personalities, I guess. But we're also interested in people who, even if they want to have a more of a dual complementary co-leadership model, and there are things they're more interested in, they still learn from each other. So I think a completely, like Euella was saying, the difference between a job share really and a co-leadership, and how you guys do that together. Because we know there will probably be a lot of people who have more of those creative skills and maybe less of the kind of business and executive director type skills.
So in terms of the role, so it's currently 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday. Um, and we've had some questions from people about whether that could be 5 days a week. And we've said that for Rising, it's important to us that our team are able to work part-time to acknowledge other creative practices that they might have or caring responsibilities. But yes, if you did want to work 5 days a week, that, as the co-directors, you're responsible for setting that and working hours and etc. But it would be something that you'd have to make a business case to the non-execs for, just to make sure that it's feasible financially and that doesn't create more fundraising pressure for the co-directors and the rest of the team. So yeah, currently 4 days a week, Monday to Thursday. A mixture of working from home and together in our studio in central Bristol. We're currently in Bath Buildings and off Stokes Croft. There's occasional evening and weekend work, but mostly it's between 10 and 6 p.m. at the moment. As we said, everyone's part-time. We have paid reflection and rest time weekly. So at the moment, the way we've organized it is that for every day of the week that you work, you get an hour of paid reflection time to journal, read, do research, rest, whatever is needed. So as Jess and I work 4 days a week, we take 4 hours of reflection every week, and then we also have a month for reflection and rest in August as well, paid. We have 28 days of paid holiday plus bank holidays and an annual week, additional week between Christmas and New Year. And also regular training is provided. So there have been questions as well about our things like our new parents policy and etc. That's also on our website on the frequently asked questions section in the job page.
So, in terms of what your responsibilities would be as co-director, you're ultimately responsible for everything, unfortunately, or fortunately. But we've tried to outline the details under the headings of vision, people, and business as the main strands of your responsibilities. So, under the vision, that would include overseeing the strategy of the agency, including spotting opportunities, responding to needs, and developing new projects, advocating for young people and representing Rising, and supporting with storytelling to get our messages across.
So, in terms of the people aspect of that, so that's supporting the Rising team through check-ins, weekly meetings, and annual reflections, building relationships with Rising's community of young creatives, also managing communication with Rising's advisory board and the non-execs, and just making sure that what's going on in the agency is communicated to everyone that needs to know what's going on. Building relationships with current and future partners, championing a caring work culture where people don't overwork and burn out, and also investing in your own training, development, and coaching.
And then under the business of Rising, so there's keeping up to date with Rising's finances through our bookkeeper. So we have a freelance bookkeeper, our accountancy software, and filing of the annual accounts with our accountant. Keeping official records up to date, including HMRC for all like payroll, tax responsibilities, and company's house, etc. Renewing the insurance every year in line with current agency needs, balancing the need for income generation with the mission of the agency, regularly reviewing policies and procedures, including kind of keeping up to date with any changing legislation, but also radical ways to think about these kind of things. Reporting for funders, whether that's like reporting on what's happened or money you've spent, and supporting the next leadership transition in 2031.
So just to give a little bit of a an overview of what a typical week might look like. And as Jess said, like the role is kind of everything. So the great thing about that is that your weeks can look really different. But there's enough agency and autonomy for you to put maybe a bit of structure into your weeks to if that feels good to have a bit of consistency. But so day one, it might be meeting with your co-director, writing some funding applications. Day two is like usually when we have our weekly team meetings, and doing other project or partner meetings. Day three could be around sector meetings or facilitating a session with a partner. Day four is could be around focused time on larger tasks, e.g., writing, report reading, developments, etc., and doing some of that rest and reflection. So we try to keep meetings to days two and three, which is when we usually are in the studio, with the first day and the fourth day of the week for more like freer focus work, maybe even working from home. But that's just how we've organized it up until now, and you might have another way that works best for you.
So what we'll be looking for is, whilst we're open to those with applicable skills rather than direct experience, we know it is helpful for applicants to know exactly what we'll be looking for as part of the recruitment process to make it as fair as possible and for you to showcase yourselves in the best way possible. So at this stage, we're looking for applications from individuals, and you'll be assessed on how you individually meet the criteria. We've also made sure that application questions will ask you to speak directly to these points.
So the essential criteria is that we'll be looking for in question one is showing how you're motivated by the radical potential of creativity and young people to drive social justice and wider change. And then in question two, we'll be exploring like how whether there's evidence of valuing of collaboration and showcasing of other qualities and skills for a successful co-leadership. Question three is going to be about your drive to get things done and see things through and make things happen. Question four is going to be about your ability to navigate conflict and failure, learn from it, and move on positively. And then in question five, it's going to be about your ability to communicate a message and get a range of people excited by it on scale. So how this translates in the role, it will be around getting like motivating Rising's team, board, community, but also the cultural sector and business partners to get on board with our messaging.
And then this is some of the criteria that won't actually be marked in the shortlisting, but it's kind of nice to have. So you could talk about any of these in the previous application questions or specifically as part of question 7, which is like, is there anything else you'd like to tell us? So nice to have criteria is experience in the arts as an artist, producer, or similar, experience working with young people, experience of activism, organizing, or collective action, lived experience that reflects our community, e.g., BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, people of color, disabled, LGBTQIA+, working class, GRT, which is Gypsy, Romany, and Traveller, immigrant, refugee, or asylum seekers, and an understanding of the wider cultural sector, meaning Bristol and or beyond.
So how to apply? So we have seven application questions that we'd like you to answer either through our online type form, which you can submit as written answers or video or audio. And that's on the website and in the job pack. Sending the completed application form from the job pack via email to hello@rising.org.uk, or answering another way, answering the questions in another way. As long as you make sure that you answer all the questions, all seven questions and some of the information about you, and send it to us in either the job pack or through the email. And all of the information can be found on the website as well.
And yeah, that all important deadline is 11:59 p.m., so just before midnight on Sunday, the 22nd of February. And then we will be inviting between 10 and 15 successful applicants for first stage interviews by Thursday, the 5th of March. And I think the dates for those interviews are confirmed as the 16th and 17th of March now. And we expect the whole process of recruitment to take from 8 to 12 weeks from the date applications close to the final decision. So hopefully around May-ish, but we'll go through the full process in a minute. But first, we just wanted to see if there were any questions so far. Sharon.
So we have one that says, hey both, is there a direction you hope to see Rising heading in over the next few years that you haven't managed to journey slash tap into just yet? Oh, sorry. That is a good question. I think there have been loads of things that have come up um in our term, but also when we were in the team. There have been conversations about space. Like currently, we have a studio in Bath Buildings, but there at times have been ambitions or murmurings from the community about having access to studio space. Um, for various different reasons, we've not done that and not and felt like our energy might be best used doing other things. So we've never done that. That's been something that has come up. And particularly now um, when Bristol is becoming such an expensive place to live and work, what are some of the ways that we can resource emerging artists to be able to create is, I guess, a question. Um, I think, yeah, looking back, I feel like there's been a lot of things that we have done. There are also, I guess, political issues that there are some things that I think Rising have stepped more into or stepped back or would want to step more into. So maybe over this next phase, there might be particular issues that Rising might want to champion or move back into more of a like a um, flagship project model that we saw a lot more during Kamina's time as co-director. But basically, the floor is yours. But over to you, Jess, if there's anything you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think what's so exciting about leading Rising is it is really like obviously you are working in response to a community and their needs and what's going on in society, and the whole idea is that the agency is kind of a microcosm of that and creating new systems that work against the systemic injustice that we see in the rest of the world. But it is also, let's be real, slightly driven by your own personal interests. And so I think some of the areas that we've gone into around like work culture or doing a little bit more like consultancy outside of Bristol and things like that have been more along the lines of like personal interests in some ways. A lot of the film work that we've done as well as through like Euella's personal network. So I think like that definitely comes into play. And I think that is also part of what's beautiful but also can be tricky about this role is you are part of a collective and you are a leader, but you're also part of a collective. So it's both about you and your development and your profiling, but also it always needs to feed back into the collective. And we've been having a lot of conversations about how this is like implicit or explicit. Because obviously when you're an artist, you often are doing that thing where you're both like, I'm an artist and I'm amazing and hyping yourself up against all imposter syndrome, but you're also often working collectively with other people to build something greater than the sum of its parts. So I think, yeah, there's a lot of that kind of give and take in terms of what your interests are, in terms of how you kind of steer the agency. I think the things that Euella's touched on have been really key. I think like it's also that balance between following the trends in terms of the agency work, which is definitely a lot more trend responsive, if you like. So like there's been a big switch in a majority of our agency work coming through artistic commissions towards much more consultancy. Um, and like how we followed those trends and made them still work for us and still deliver the kind of work that we're really excited and that makes the kind of change that we want to see. But I think there's also something about like, you get that from the agency, but also the funding can support some of those things that are a bit bigger. So we've just kind of started, I think, feeling our way in a sort of climate justice space and what that looks like. That obviously feeds into a lot of the issues around the housing crisis that our community faced. There's also a lot of conversations around like the rise of racism and community cohesion that are definitely not going anywhere over the next 5 years. So I think there's also something about how Rising wants to respond to that. Um, but yeah, I think generally it's open. And I think we're really like we have been going for 10 years now, and a lot of mine and Euella's term has been about professionalizing what we do, but it's still very much there for the reshaping and readjusting as the new co-directors see fit.
That was great. Hopefully that answered your question. And doesn't create more questions for people, but feel free to actually ask more questions. And then we had another question of like, who do the co-directors report to for ongoing developments within Rising, like funding, finance, effects of government policy? Would this be the non-executive directors? So yes, it would be, and it's also each other. So in terms of as Jess said about the agency structure, we have our non-execs there to support with the head of the agency's work, and so that's a place where we would bring those conversations, and also the advisory board in our meetings or in the meeting notes or whatever. But that's a space for us to really pull those things apart and see how those things, like you say, like funding, finance, effects of government policy impact the heart of the work. But then in your co-directorship, there are opportunities to really fill that out, and also with the team. So um obviously it's just us here today, but in terms of the team plays a big role in having those, being able to have those deep conversations in team meetings or in your reflection time or during August of Rest. So that's another space. We take a really collaborative approach to fundraising, and it's usually a few of us working on a bid together, and therefore you get to really talk these things through and understand the why of everything. I don't know if you've got anything else to add, Jess, to that.
No, I think there is definitely a lot of like self accountability within Rising and particularly within this role. And we are chatting at the moment, us, the non-exec directors, but also the advisory board about how to make like, I guess, a bit more of that sort of line management, a bit more tangible, which I guess is also sort of part of this conversation. Because at the moment we do have kind of annual reviews and like regular either two-to-ones between us two co-directors and team members or one-to-ones with each other. And we actually do each other's annual reviews, but that actually for the new co-directors, particularly if they're new to the agency, the non-execs probably need some kind of more formal line management, at least at the beginning. And what that might look like and who has capacity to do that, because all of our non-execs are freelancers. So there is also something around like um, yeah, kind of interrogating what that looks like for Rising and the people who we have brought into leadership. Because often in a traditional organization, say it's the chair of the board who is the line manager for the director, they would be a full-time employee somewhere else. So the organization wouldn't necessarily need to pay them. But also as a CIC, we do have more freedom to like pay non-execs and advisory board members for supporting our work in a way that you don't have with trustees and charities. So yeah, it's that's kind of who we report to, I guess. But like Euella said, everything is done in conversation. Like budget setting will often start with us, but needs approval from the non-execs. And I think a lot of it is more collaborative and conversational than it is like we report to them and they rubber stamp things, if you know what I mean.
Awesome. And then there was another question about, do you have any examples of the different types of projects that took place during the prior leadership term? So I'm assuming you mean during Kamina's term. So I can start that, but feel free to clarify if you meant something else. So we had like our Elevate mentoring program that was supporting young people who I believe had particular lived experience of being refugee asylum seekers. But it was a mentoring program, and actually Rising started off mainly as a mentoring service. That was like particularly when Rising first started. Kamina didn't have a lot of resources. The agency was very small. But what we did have was a network and was able to kind of match young people with sector professionals for for mentoring, and that's evolved even now to the point where we do like reverse mentoring, where actually we create opportunities for young people to mentor sector leaders. So mentoring is a big part of our work as well as coaching. Most of the team are trained in coaching practice, so that is another thing that comes out in the ways that we work, the ways that we facilitate projects or facilitate spaces for partners and young people. We also did a Reimagine Libraries project. In fact, we've done a lot of work with the library service over the years. Um, Starting with a young people's consultation piece where we went out to young people, did a whole load of engagement and outreach around what the right libraries need to be spaces that are relevant for you, because particularly the kind of 16 to 25 age range, there was a drop off in terms of how young people were engaging with the libraries, particularly if they weren't in education or they weren't using it for educational purposes. So that was a big engagement piece, but actually thinking about how we could create like creative responses to how people are thinking and engaging with the libraries, and that then turned into multiple different projects. We worked with Southmead Library, Junction Free Library. We even had an exhibition in Central Library. I'm trying to think if there's any other projects. We've done exhibitions, we've done collaborations with Spike Island. We did a whole We Are Here project, bringing young people of color into Spike Island and exhibiting in their open studios. Um, yeah, lots of stuff.
I think that was pretty good. Yeah, I think some of the main we one of the exhibitions was focused on young people's mental health, and then
Mm,
a lot of the
all in
work
the
kind of
mind.
yeah, a lot of the work was both around institutions like libraries or museums, like
Mm,
wanting to appeal more and engage with young people, particularly like Euella said, that kind of next stage after school. And then I guess that evolved into also this kind of leadership advocacy of On Board and Be It that we mentioned in the presentation, which has kind of then led on to the leadership transition and things like that. And just to say, like right at the beginning, the way that me and Euella got involved in Rising is we were invited onto the youth board. So Rising used to have an advisory board and a youth board, and then the youth board ended up making all the decisions. So we became the board, and then me and Euella joined the team, so we left the board. But we've kind of been doing this kind of youth leadership stuff for most of the time we've been around, and I think it's been really interesting and exciting to see a lot more of this kind of advocacy spring up. And obviously, we're not the first people to run like getting young people onto board schemes, but I think just the breadth and impact of On Board and the rethinking of systems is really what the difference is with our projects. Is it's much more embedded, and it's kind of yeah, rethinking of systems, not just kind of going, oh, it would be nice to just have a young person on a board so our photos look better and our stats are better for reporting. Like actually, what does that mean? And how does your board culture also have to change to adapt for a wider representation of people being present in that space? So yeah, hopefully that's what you meant by prior leadership term.
Well, like, actually, no, I meant what you're doing right now.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you.
Um, cool. Should we go on to talk a little bit more about the process itself? Yeah.
Yeah. And you feel free to continue putting questions in the Q&A, and we'll answer them as we go. So, in terms of the process, so as we've said, we might not have said explicitly, but feels like we've said it a lot. We're committed to co-leadership and have actually worked with a steering group over the past 6 months or so to try and design a process that is accessible to those who have never led before or those who don't have a current collaborator, to ensure that this opportunity to co-lead feels inclusive to as many people as possible. So we know that it's a really big ask to get people to take part in this process for, let's say, 8 to 12 weeks. and hold that uncertainty for so long around where you are in the process and the stages, etc. Therefore, we've committed to supporting those who progress to stage one interviews to join a leadership cohort, who we hope we can support with opportunity like platforming and sharing opportunities. But hopefully, over the next in the next few minutes, you'll hear a little bit more about the full recruitment process.
So yeah, this is a kind of big overview with some nicely colored shapes. So phase one is all about kind of individual profiling. So that's the kind of phase we're in at the moment, or will be when the deadline for applications closes on the 22nd of February. And then, like we mentioned earlier, we'll be interviewing about 10 to 15 people after they've been shortlisted. And uh, we will also be people can ask for feedback throughout, but it might take us until the end of the process to provide that just because of how capacity intense this process is from the organizational side as well. And we just want to be upfront about that because we know how important feedback is. So then following the kind of individual interviews on the 16th and 17th of March, we move into the matchmaking phase. Um, so this is where we'll be taking individual candidates who have had successful interviews and matching them into co-director pairs. So we are going to be asking people as part of the application process if there's someone that they've previously worked with who they know is also applying for the co-director role, that they can name them and say, actually, I've worked with this person before and we're both applying and we'd really love to work together. But we really want people to have had those conversations before so that they both go into that with an awareness of like, I'm putting you, or you put, a lot of being co-director is having those difficult conversations and managing different types of relationships. Like through the years, me and Euella have had friends who are also part of the community who have applied for roles in the team and not got them, and kind of managing those dynamics is always going to be part of being co-director, particularly if you have lived experience of the community that you're supporting. So I think we just wanted to be really upfront with that in the application process, but also not make it inaccessible for anyone who doesn't have an existing collaborator that they work with. So as part of the matchmaking process, we will match people into pairs. We'll have like an initial meeting, and then there can be a bit of a like what we call internally a vibe check, just to be like, do we get on? Could we work together? Do we think the same way about what we want to do with Rising? And then there'll be a kind of check-in after that meeting. And if it works, great. You move on to the next stage. If it doesn't, like Euella said, we revisit that leadership pool, which will probably be everybody who interviewed at first stage to potentially be rematched. And I think we also understand that there's an incentive to be like, no, this person's fine, don't worry about it, to make sure that you can continue in the process. But imagine having to do that for the next 5 years. Like, let's not commit too soon, you know? So I think we're really aware of all of the dynamics in that, and hopefully people can kind of enter into the process of full acknowledgement of that. And we've kind of limited that to two rematches, partly for time for all of the candidates as a whole, but also so that people who are in the leadership pool kind of have a clear answer about their future in the process as soon as possible. So then we're hoping by sort of early April to have 3 to 5 pairs finalised, and then people will be offered a stipend of £150 each for their time to continue in the process. And then we move into sort of the final process, phase three, which is piloting. So we will be hosting a planning session for all the pairs to work on their interview subject, which will basically be like, what is your particular pair, your co-directorship's vision for Rising? So what we hope is that that session, which I think will be facilitated by me and Euella, will be a chance for you guys to kind of work together, but also it won't be competitive because everyone's visions for the agency will be very much tailored to them as individuals. And then we will have paired interviews as the second stage interviews. So you'll present your vision and we'll ask you some questions. And then there'll be a kind of final decision meeting where the final selection is made. And then the new co-directors will meet with me and Euella to start thinking about the transition. So we're hoping to have the new co-directors selected by May, and then we can start talking about what that transition looks like. And at the moment, me and Euella are thinking we'll be around until the end of June. But obviously, all of that is quite fuzzy depending on who gets the co-director role.
Beautifully said. So, Jess has gone through most of this, but yeah, just highlighting that in this phase, particularly right now, the individual profiling, just to be aware that you're going to be marked individually against the points listed under who we're looking for. That aligns with the criteria and the question. We encourage you to chat beforehand if you're thinking of putting someone down, just have that open and honest conversation and see where it gets you. If you don't put anyone down at that on that question of is there anyone you want to co-lead with, that does not put you at a disadvantage. Just really helpful for us to just know when it comes to the matchmaking process. And then unsuccessful applicants can request feedback, but you might have to wait to the end of the process to get that. We're going to be shortlisting 10 to 15 applicants for interview, either in person or virtually on the 16th and 17th of March. And we'll send all the interview questions in advance and also share a guide to interviewing with Rising so that you know what to expect. And you can also let us know if there's anything that we need to know before the interview.
Yeah, here's just a bit more about that kind of matchmaking process. So yeah, what that might look like. Matches will be limited to two per candidate. What kind of introductions, and if it's a good fit or not, and then moving through to getting the stipend and continuing the process. This is probably the most untested bit of this process for us, I think it's fair to say. And this whole process was designed with a steering group of experts, I guess, from a range of backgrounds, people who have been part of co-leaderships, skeptics of co-leaderships, people from our community, people who were kind of original team members of Rising. So we've really put a lot of thought into this, but this is the part of the process that could go in lots of different ways. So we just wanted to be really transparent about exactly what is involved. And again, just to reiterate, like that kind of honesty is going to be really important to think about who you could genuinely work with as much as you can figure that out from a couple of meetings as part of this process for the next 5 years. And just to say also, me and Euella, even though we were both part of the Rising team and had been part of Rising for a little bit before we became co-directors, we didn't really work together that much. Euella was very much on the kind of engagement side, and I was very much on the development side. So it can work with people that you haven't worked with before, and we've created a really beautiful co-directorship, and we hope that we're able to match people in a similar fashion in this process as well.
So, just a little bit on the piloting or the final phase. So, once you've had your planning set, well, once you've had your match been matched, all the pairs will be invited to a 2 hour planning session with Jess and I, where we'll be helping you to kind of think about what your shared vision is for Rising, and we'll do that in a kind of freelance style project development structure. It should be fun and engaging, and we won't make it feel weird. This is the bit that we definitely can do very well. And then there will be a bit of space and time if you need a bit of extra time to kind of develop your ideas before the interview. And then we'll have the second stage interview, which will be a paired interview. So you and your match co-director will then present your kind of vision for the next 5 years of Rising, and we'll ask you some questions, and that can be either on Zoom or in person with the interview panel. And then there will be a kind of selection phase where the panel will meet and decide. And then from that, we'll then start moving into the kind of transition planning. So people will get their feedback who have been part of the process that have requested it, and then the new co-directors and the oldies, us, will meet to kind of think about what that transition looks like, particularly taking into account any notice periods that people have, skill sets, anything, any kind of particular upskilling that people need in the meantime, and kind of plan that handover as well.
Okay, cool. So yeah, that's the whole process in its entirety. We've got one more question that's come through, but feel free to add them in. We've got about 8 minutes left. So as a youth-led organization, are you wanting the next leaders within the 18 to 30-ish age bracket, or are you being flexible depending on the person? Want to answer, Euella?
Yes, I can. So, oh, sorry, my phone. Is that my phone ringing? Oh yeah, 2 secs. You probably can't. You might not be able to hear it, but I can. So in terms of age, no, we are not specifying in terms of age. It's open to anyone that feels that they want and are ready to step up into this opportunity. I guess one of the things that the panel will be considering is like whether the co-directors represent the community, whether that's through lived experience or have a connection to them in some way. So, yeah, age is not a factor, and we will not be asking age in the application process either. So, please feel free to apply regardless of how old you are, but maybe make sure that you're not under 16 or whatever. That's maybe something we should specify.
Yeah, no children.
No children. Unfortunately, as a young people's organization, we're like, no children. Maybe the next co-directors can do that in 2031.
What, get into child labor?
Yeah, basically, but hopefully pay them.
Oh, sorry. And then we've got another one. Where can Rising currently work? So currently, we are a very like Bristol-based organization. So we think of it, the metaphor we've used previously as a tree. So our roots are in Bristol, and the kind of civic and social justice history of this city is really inherent in the work that we do. The whole team is currently based in Bristol, and our community is spread across the city. But obviously, by the nature partly of young people's kind of movement to university, to not being able to afford areas, to links across the UK and beyond, like our community has expanded into different spaces, and we've also worked in different spaces. Like particularly when I think about like our leadership work, that's taken us all over the UK. We've worked with cohorts of leaders from Mexico. We've delivered workshops in Edinburgh. Delivered in a conference in the US around like models of co-leadership, power sharing, youth leadership. So there's not really like a limit, but I do think like part of what makes Rising unique and special is this kind of link that it has with Bristol and the particular flavour of that. So I think it is important that you do have some kind of connection to the city. But also like one of the things that has been brought up at various points in Rising's history is this idea of a kind of
Like,
what's the word?
well, is it not franchising, but like a
Yeah.
little like offshoots and
Yeah, like
yeah,
what if you set up a Rising in a different city? And there's a
yeah,
lot more of a push, particularly in Bristol at the moment, towards regional working across the West of England Combined Mayoral Authority. So that's kind of South Gloucestershire, North Somerset, Bath, and Bristol. And so we are like creating networks across that. We do have a few members of the community who live and work in Bath. So like what does that look like rising at a kind of regional and national level? But like I say, that kind of tree model of being rooted in like Bristol and the creative energy that lives here has been quite key to our identity for our first 10 years at least. I don't
Mm.
know if you have anything else to
No,
add.
no, no. Hopefully that's useful.
Yeah.
Person that asked. Yeah. We've got 5 more minutes if anyone has any um additional questions. I've while we think, I might have another poll for people just to keep you on your toes. Is the job pack clear? So yes, I have all the info I need. The next one is I have a few questions still, and it was confusing and unclear. And just to say that Jess and I are not in the final decision about the co-director, so feel free to like come for the job pack. It won't have any it won't have any bearing if you want to rip it apart and be like, this is awful. Amazing. Well, everyone so far has said yes, all I have all the info I need. That's exciting. I love that feeling. Hopefully that means that people feel like, yes, I got everything I need. I can go do my application. And it doesn't feel as scary if it ever did. I'll share the results just in case people are. Oh, we've had another question. Yay. Oh, we've had some more questions. Yay. So the first one is, yeah, I had to skip out and miss the answer to this. Sorry. As, oh yeah, maybe Jess can answer this. As a youth-led organization, are you wanting the next leaders within the 18 to 30-ish age bracket, or are you being flexible depending on the person?
Yeah, we're not looking for a specific age range. It's much more about like ideally the person would have some lived experience in common with the community, but no, it's not limited by age range.
And then there was another question of, did I hear correctly that Jess said a June start date? Dun
So,
dun dun.
oh, do you want
No, there you
to?
go.
So we're hoping to have selected the final co-directors in May, and with no notice period, they could start straight away. Me and Euella are currently planning our lives around being part of Rising until the end of June, just because we needed some form of timeline. But part of once those co-directors are selected in sort of early to mid-May, will be around that transition planning and that handover planning. So it's not like me and Euella, like we're here until the end of June and then we never are going to be contactable ever again.
Mm,
And then also we understand that if people do have like long notice periods that they need to give, there might also be a bit of like holding in between and where that sits between us or the non-execs or the rest of the team and things like that. So it's kind of open, but those are the sort of two milestones, I guess, is like the selection of the co-directors and then we're planning to work here until the end of June. Does that make sense, Euella?
that made sense to me, but I know I know the deal. Um, yeah.
Okay. Should we call it then? If you do have any other questions, I will just drop the. Oh no, did I find out that I can't
You have
actually
to put
ask?
it in the Q&A. Oh wait. No, you have to answer someone's question.
Yeah, I will. We do have like an open Q&A form.
Mm,
If there's something that you think after this or when you're looking back at the job pack or the application form or anything like that, that you can just stick additional questions into. So I'm just trying to find the link for that and then I will put it as a reply. And that can also be anonymous.
yes.
So I'll just stick that in answer. Oh, oh no. So I've just put that as answer to the 18 to 30-ish. And there is a more detailed reply about that on the FAQs on the recruitment page on the website as well, about like, age ranges and the kinds of people we're looking for and stuff like that. But it's not specified. We're not asking for anyone's date of birth in the application form or anything like that.
Great.
Oh,
Well, thank you
okay.
all for joining us.
Yeah, thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, everyone.
Yeah, and happy applying. Good luck,
Good
maybe.
luck. We've got just over 2 weeks to apply,
You got
22nd of
you got this.
February. Yeah.
See you
Bye.
later. Bye bye.